Hello! Welcome back to my pinball build series in which I attempt to turn large chunks of, let's be honest, thick cardboard into a 3/4 scale virtual pinball machine. In this week's instalment I'm working on the backbox again. Last week I put together the shell. Now that shell needs some important components added to it. I make a cracking mistake with the speakers which result in some plastic carnage, so you have that to look forward to. One of the things I've managed to do well on the previous arcade machine builds is to make a bezel surround for the screen from MDF. On the last two I made the surrounding space around the screen large enough to give me plenty of wood to work with. On this backbox screen I have almost no spare space. The screen housing is just 14mm smaller than the width of the space it's going into. Not to mention the speakers only just fit into the space below the screen. This had me scratching my head for a while. Could I risk cutting a surround made of MDF that thin and expect it to be strong enough? Well, there's only one way to find out. I marked around the screen housing and then measured the actual visible screen size and transferred that onto the wood. After dodging bad weather for a few days, I managed to sneak out into the fresh air and sunshine to cut the hole in the bezel. In future projects over the winter I'll have to carefully plan my outside work. I can't wait to be standing in the snow doing this in the freezing cold. I would normally make an inside cut like this by drilling 2 holes in the corners. I thought I'd try a different way this time and drilled a hole in the middle of each side. The hope was to get a cleaner corner. Sometimes the drilled hole in the corner can make the jigsaw blade wander. It seemed to work fairly well. Might be my imagination though. With the hole in the bezel cut, I now need to trim the edges exactly to the lines. Back to my router and pattern bit. If you are ever thinking of building an arcade machine yourself and are wondering what tools are the bare minimum, I would suggest a halfway decent router with a pattern bit and a jigsaw. Keep an eye out on the second-hand market. These tools are readily available at very cheap prices. With just these two and a known straight edge you can achieve excellent results. I use extra scraps of wood to support the router base plate on this thin outside edge. Without this the router would rock and spoil the line, ruining the piece. The bit won't go all the way to the corners, so I'll tidy those up later. MDF dust is terrible stuff, not just for humans. Tools also get seriously clogged up with the stuff. I try to keep it out as much as possible with an occasional brush. Next, I want to bevel the edges of this bezel so it doesn't look so thick. I had considered using 12mm MDF, but that would have been just too weak on the thin sections. As I run into the corner, I notice that the bearing on the bevel bit is running into a rough area near the corner. Some quick filing sorts this out. My calculations were slightly out, but this is not a problem. A dirty hack here is to colour the visible metal of the screen with a Sharpie. You can also use tape, but that tends to accumulate dust on the sticky edge. I need a way to mount the screen inside the backbox. A tried and trusted method is to fix a board across the inside of the backbox and screw the screen to it using the Visa mounts. I would have probably done something like this, but I realised if I ever wanted to remove the screen, I would not be able to get it past any mounting method that wasn't itself removable. There are 4 3mm mounting holes along the edges of the screen, and I decided to try to use these. Wood would not be strong enough, so I fired up Tinkercad and designed a simple bracket. They are small enough that it only takes a few minutes to print a couple for testing. You can see here I've chopped out some of the side battens that support the bezel to allow the brackets room to be mounted. They're a little on the thin side, and I also noticed that I won't easily be able to screw these into the sides of the box, as the back of the screen is in the way of these lower brackets. So back to the drawing board screen. I make them much larger at the top so I can keep the screws far apart. That should stop things moving about. I also add the missing thickness and some extra strength in the form of a ramp. This worked out better than I hoped. I'll be using this method a lot in the future. Oh dear, the speakers don't fit. I did anticipate this and was prepared to trim the edges of the speakers to make them fit. I go at them with the block plane. This worked really well. And now, after some drastic surgery, they fit. They still need some holes to let the sound out though. Here we are, heading for my weekly big mistake. In these measurements, I've not allowed for the battens inside the box, but don't worry children, things are going to be okay. In fact, they will turn out better than they would have. I need the holes to be exact, so a pilot hole with the drill press will help to keep the hole saw I'll be using straight. And it's not in the middle. I could leave it like this, but it will always look cross-eyed. As you can see here, the batten is in the way. I could chop that piece of batten out. That would be fairly simple and probably wouldn't weaken the cabinet. But I'm reluctant to do that. It would end up looking a bit messy. I could shave some of the plastic off the top of the case of the speaker to get it as close as possible, but I don't know what's inside these speakers and I'm 6mm out. That's quite a lot to take off. So I decided to go all in and cut the plastic out of the problem altogether. These put up a hell of a fight. Logitech really didn't want anyone inside of these. Once I had the first one open, the second one went much faster. Now I knew what to expect. Now we have a new problem. The holes are now too big. Before sorting that out, I decided that now is the time to fix the bezel in place. Before I do that, I want to clean up the beveled edges and the corners. This will be easier while it's still a separate piece. A flush cut saw gets me a nice corner. I'll refine this further once it has a coat of paint on. I need some speaker brackets, so back to Tinkercad. Tinkercad is free, runs in a browser, and it's free. It's not especially powerful, but it's simple and easy to learn and free, and great for knocking together small things to 3D print. After about an hour, I have 4 perfect speaker brackets.
Nom.
The last thing this week is to fix the backbox to the main table section. I drill a couple of straight holes using a guide and widen them with a bit big enough for the bolts. Next, I drill a larger hole partway into the top to allow the shank of the T-nut room to sink in. A larger washer underneath stops the bolt head from crushing its way into the wood below. I wind the bolt down until the T-nut is drawn down into the wood, fixing it in place. I could use thumbscrew type bolts here later, but I think I'll want these to be really tight to stop it moving about, so I'll be sticking with the standard hex head. And that's it for this episode. Next week I need to rebuild the PC board as the one I made before is shonky and terrible. I'll also start working on the plunger with a 3D printed solution for mounting a sliding potentiometer. Doesn't that sound exciting? Thank you for watching though. If the thought of a 3D printed sliding potentiometer mounting solution sounds like something you might want to watch, or you're just here to laugh at my mistakes, click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out. And if you want to tell me about your own projects, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Reading your comments is my favourite thing about releasing videos. Even the terrible puns. I'll see you next week.